Hello and welcome to the Organic Wine Podcast. I'm Adam Huss, coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Thank you so much for listening. The Organic Wine Podcast has a new website. It's quite imaginatively located at organicwinepodcast.com. We have the last couple months of episodes posted, and we're in the process of creating pages for every past episode. So check it out if you want to see all of the great content that has been on the Organic Wine Podcast. As part of this, I just want to say I try to be a thoughtful and ecological business person, as well as wine grower and winemaker. So I think about the impact and the values implicit in using any business or service. Because of that, I'm a very reluctant user of social media. I intend to gradually eliminate my participation on those platforms. So I'm asking those of you listening to go to organicwinepodcast.com and sign up for the email list. We will never give, sell, trade, or otherwise move your email or any information to anyone else besides us. And we will not start emailing you daily with spammy sales messages. So please join the email list without worry at organicwinepodcast.com. My guests for this episode are Aaron and Holly Puhala, the owners of Vineyard Innovations in Ohio. Aaron and Holly met in school where they both studied chemical engineering. This chemical romance blossomed into a life where they breed new varieties of grapes that the world has never seen before. These varieties are cold hardy and disease resistant, as well as delicious. They've been at this for 20 years now and have a handful of varieties to share with the world, as well as some really great ideas about how to make grape breeding a profitable venture for more people. But I want to let their own words from their website serve as a really great introduction to this conversation. There is a quiet revolution happening in the world of wine. Growers everywhere are facing the realities of a changing climate and considering replacing their established wine grape varieties with others that are more suited to the challenges of modern viticulture. At the same time, consumers facing a sea of sameness are seeking out new and exciting wines crafted by artisans with passionate focus on creating quality wines with authenticity of place. Perhaps never before has the table been set more perfectly for the emergence of new grape varieties that answer the needs and desires of both wine grower and consumer. At Vineyard Innovations, we create new wine grape varieties having resistance to the extremes of climate and disease pressure that are perfectly suited to sustainable, organic, and biodynamic viticulture practices. Exciting aroma and flavor combinations are paving the way for the emergence of iconic wines that will open the door to the exploration of new terroirs that today are unreachable. Welcome to a new world of wine. I couldn't have said it better. Enjoy. Welcome, guys. Thanks for doing this. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Adam.
Can you introduce yourselves and say where you are and in the world right now? Yeah.
Sure. We are Aaron and
Holly Puhala.
Right, and we are we're in Ohio. So home is in Northeast Ohio in Kent, and
fantastic. Kent.
Yeah, our vineyard operation is in Geneva, Ohio, Harpersville Township in the Grand River Valley.
And when you say, okay, Geneva is really famous in New York for breeding. And as it turns out, you are doing that in Ohio in Geneva. Is that right?
Right.
Is that what you're saying? The base of operations is...
So it's funny. So different Geneva, right? Geneva, New York, Geneva, Ohio. But yeah.
Yeah, that is. I mean, maybe we should just make that a trend.
Maybe every state needs Geneva.
every state
should be in Geneva.
It does seem like there are Genevas in every state. No,
I'm sure, right?
It feels like there's like a Paris, Texas. There's probably a Paris in every state. I mean, who knows? But and this is why we want to talk about the grape breeding, not Geneva. But both of you guys are doing this on the side, right? At the moment, this is not your full-time thing. Right. Can you talk? Yeah, I mean, do you guys want to talk about your life and how this operation fits into it, and what the name of it is, by the way?
Sure. Yeah. So the name of the operation is Vineyard Innovations. We named the company, formalized that about 10 years ago.
2010.
Yeah, so a little over 10 years ago. But we've been breeding wine grapes for over 20 years now. So it's interesting. So yeah, so this is not a full-time venture for us right now. My career that started since I graduated from college, chemical engineer. We actually met in school as chemical engineers at the University of Akron. but I've been in the rubber and the tire industry for my whole career, and still am. But grape breeding is something that has really taken a hold of all our free time. So you ask, how do we fit it in? It's like, well, just barely.
Now, were you both chemical engineers? Did I get that
both
right?
chemical
Yes.
engineers. We met in school at the University of Akron. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That ties so closely in with breeding. I mean, I'm not sure if it does at all, but it seems like there is you could make an excuse for anything, right? So, what is
Yeah.
what is the mindset that you need for breeding? Like, and does chemical engineering at all help?
Yeah, so I think kind of the background there, chemical engineering um, is something that's obviously very tied to the wine industry, right? There's a lot of chemical engineering in the wine industry, but I think if you kind of take another step back and just look at our backgrounds and our families, so we both come from families where our fathers were very much gardeners, right? So my dad was a big time gardener. Holly's dad was a big time gardener,
Right.
and we kind of raised that way. Um, love growing things, and so I think that connection to the love of growing things, and then the chemistry connection, and the processing connection, through chemical engineering really makes the wine industry specifically something that's just incredibly attractive. We got into the interest in wine kind of early in our married life. Neither one of us were really exposed to wine so much growing up.
Right.
My exposure was probably, as I mentioned to you when we talked before, really limited to a sip out of a glass on special occasions, with my parents, at holidays, and then it was typically some Blue Nun or Black Tower that that my grandparents picked up to have with ham or stuffed cabbage or something, coming from a Hungarian family.
Wow.
So not a whole lot of exposure.
My family didn't drink at all, so I really didn't have any exposure to wine at all. So that was something that Aaron and I both discovered together, and
Yeah.
it was pretty cool to just try. We went out, tried a bottle of wine, and like, oh, this is good, and just kind of spiraled from there.
Yeah. So very very limited, right? And then the wine that kind of got us into wine was actually a 1994 Eberly Viognier. So
wow.
you can imagine, 1994 vintage, California Viognier.
Yeah.
First exposure to something like that when your only experience really has been, really, really, really inexpensive kind of Riesling, right?
Good point. Right.
And I just remember, tasting that wine and then realizing how is this possible? How can something be so thick, and so viscous and taste almost sweet, even though it wasn't. It was such a departure from what I had experienced before, and that really kind of drew me in and drew both of us in.
Mhm.
And we started, tasting a lot more wines. We kind of, constantly going out and trying different things, making it a point to bring something different home, from the store and try it. And before too long, there was a significant interest, developed for us. How can we become part of this, right? And that was honestly a challenge, right? Because here we are living in Northeast Ohio. All these fantastic wines that we're trying. They're for the most part they're from the West Coast, or they're from from France or Italy or somewhere. We tried some wines from around here, and some we liked, some we didn't, honestly. But my mind, immediately went to, how can we do this? My day job is I told you it's in the rubber and the tire industry, but at heart I'm an inventor, right? I'm an innovator. That's what I do. I head up R&D teams, teams of people who are developing new products, developing new things, typically through chemistry, but always it's an innovative approach. And for me, the way my mind works is, as soon as I learn something new that catches my interest, my mind immediately goes to, how can I do it better, right?
Yeah.
Or what hasn't been done with this,
Well,
and
this
can I do
ties
it?
into this was a question that I had when you guys tasted that Viognier, that Everly Viognier. Did you seek every piece of information you could find about how it was made afterwards, like to try to deconstruct it, or did
Definitely,
you? Yeah, did I
definitely,
imagine? Yeah, yeah.
definitely digging. And honestly, at
Right.
that point, that was the beginning of the learning.
Right.
It wasn't like we already
Yes.
had this information and this knowledge about winemaking that, we were just learning, hearing some little tips and tricks about how that particular wine was made. It
How did you
was
find? Like, to what extent did you research that? Like, did you call the winery and try to talk
No,
to
I
somebody?
didn't. No, I wouldn't say we went to any depth like that, but
Okay.
it really kind of began, you know, uh,
It's a
you know,
launching point, I guess.
it was
Is.
really the launching point. Yeah,
Hmm.
good way to say it.
Yeah,
Um,
so
a lot of
exploring
reading.
winemaking in general, and specifically
Yes,
how somebody might make a Viognier, or how, yeah, that kind of thing.
Right.
So,
yes. Lots
I
of
mean,
reading, lots of books, and just
mm,
kind of immersing ourselves into whatever we can find.
and I just, want to point out, I think it's important in a way to mention the kind of wine that drew you in, which is, do you still like that kind of wine? Is my next question.
Definitely, yes.
Yes. Hmm.
Okay,
Definitely,
gotcha.
yes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel like, well, I wouldn't have been surprised by either yes or no in response to that, because I just feel like, I think the wine that I fell in love with, or made me, that did that for me, that was similar in style. I mean, it was a different style of wine. It was a Pinot Noir from Santa Rita Hills, but again, like a
mhm.
Central Coast, it had probably a little bit of RS, or at least it was really fruity, and also at the same time, elegant, and did things that
Sure.
I didn't think a liquid could do in my mouth,
Sure.
um,
And
and
Pinot
and
Noir,
yet,
right? So it was
Right.
texture.
Oh, yeah.
right, right, and probably if I went back to it now, I don't know if I'd like it as much. Maybe I would. I have no idea. I have a sense that I wouldn't like as much, just because my palate has changed, and I'd probably detect things like maybe too much oak that gave it that
Sure.
sweetness
Hmm.
that I liked, or it could have been any number of things, but.
Sure.
And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I like had an amazing palate when I was completely
Right.
ignorant, and it
I'm
was
sure that's
like,
what it was.
it's really hard to go back in time. But I do think, like, if my assumptions are right, you and I, the two of you and I, had very similar experiences in what grabbed us, and even if that changes, it's important to, I don't know. I'm wondering how, I think sometimes as a winemaker, I get out on this, very, I don't even know what to put it, but you get caught up in the idea of making a winemaker's wine, and forget that, like,
Mm,
some of the magic that brings people in is not necessarily what you like. It's a whole different style. And
sure.
it's important to
Yeah.
remember that, like, what brought you, and you two may end up being these incredible minds that change the shape of the industry. And how unfortunate would it have been if everybody was just making these lean Viogniers that were super tart, and that never grabbed your attention, and you were like, wine sucks, and moved on with your life to other things that you could just contribute your mind to. I don't know. That's obviously, like, life happens the way it happens, but it's,
What's interesting is that some of the things speaking of Viognier specifically. Um, so one of our hybrids is actually not not descended from Viognier in any way, but one of our hybrid grapes actually so one of the things when you have a new grape, you develop a new grape, you've got to learn how to make wine from it,
mm,
right? And it's not even really about learning how to make wine from it. It's uncovering what kind of wine that grape wants to be, right?
yeah,
So it was interesting because we have this one grape. It's actually has Riesling as one of its parents, but the aromatics of the grape, if you make it in the style of Riesling, which is what we first did when we first tried to make wine from it. Um, it had a very perfumed floral aromatic of lilies. Like think Asian lilies, think stargazer lily, and it was very much in the fore. Right. There was also peach and apricot and a lot of stone fruits, but the floral thing was very much in the floor, and to the point where it was too much. Right.
yeah,
And that was making the wine in very straightforward style, blocking malolactic. Um, So then I did some research and trying to thinking about what other approaches can I take, and I came across an article, and I can't quote to you where it was from at the moment, but I came across an article about Viognier, and they were talking about the great Viogniers of France, and what the person said in the article was that Viognier, if you don't take it through malolactic fermentation, doesn't develop the character that you expect from what are probably today considered to be the greatest Viogniers on the planet. And I said, oh, that's pretty interesting. So I tried doing malolactic fermentation with this particular grape, this white grape. And prior to that, I was kind of a mindset of, no, I'm just gonna maybe block malolactic with my whites. Probably because I got jaded with some of the 94 Chardonnays that we had stocked
Yeah.
up on that
Right.
after 2 years were very, very flat and not very interesting.
You had enough
I kind of
diacetyl in your palate.
yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So my mind kind of went the other way. I'm like, oh no, I'm going to do no oak, and it's going to be stony, and it's just going to be acidic. And but then when I read this article, I said, well, let me try it. So I tried malolactic fermentation with this variety, and it was interesting. The fruit, the stone fruits came forward, and the floral component went backward. So it was amazing how much it shifted the aromatics.
Wow.
And then I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. And I said, and it's funny you mentioned this, because I actually never really thought about that. I never really thought about this till you asked the question just now. I think maybe with this wine, I was thinking back to that, that first, that Viognier that we had so many years ago,
Yeah.
and it was probably influencing this particular path for this one grape. But so I was thinking, what can I do for the mouthfeel of this wine? Because I'm like, oh, it's good, it smells good, it tastes good, but it's not thick, it's not coating. It's I want more complexity on the mouthfeel. So then I read some things about skin contact with white grapes, and orange wines.
Mm.
And one thing that I knew from the hybrids that we had developed and we're developing is that they, for the most part, they have very low skin tannins, right? And that's something you'll
Right.
hear from grape breeders, trying to develop, cold hardy or disease resistant grapes.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's difficult to get the tannin. But if you are going to do a skin contact white, having low tannin, really low tannin in the skins is a great thing, because you can do long skin contact fermentation without the
Right.
risk of pulling tannins in. So we did that, and it was amazing. The complexity that we got in terms of the viscosity, the mouthfeel was tremendous. So we've done a lot of work with that grape, and looking at skin contact anywhere from about 3 months up to a year, and it's pretty phenomenal. Actually, we really love the grape. And the
Wow.
color is amazing. It's like liquid gold in the glass.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Mm.
It's
How
actually the
so?
closest I've seen to a wine that actually, people say wines have a golden color, but a lot of
That's
times you look
actually.
at them and they're yellow.
Yeah.
This one looks like gold. I mean,
And that's
to my eye,
Hmm.
with the skin contact.
with the skin contact. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
And are
And it's funny
you?
that you go ahead.
This was. I mean, you mentioned 3 different ways you made it. Is that 3 separate years? Like you had to wait for the following year to
Yes. Yeah.
remake it. So yeah, yeah. I'm just giving just giving context to the
Yeah,
time
so I think
frame that we're
so. The other
working
thing
with
that
here.
I
Yeah.
guess is important to point out is that, so when you're breeding grapes, and I listened to your interview with Tom Plocker, and he covered a lot of the technical aspects and what all's involved, and we can touch on any of that you want to as well. Um, but certainly, you get a new grape variety that you like, right?
Hmm.
You have to propagate enough vines, to make some wine. Right?
Right.
I mean, you can make, from one vine, you can make maybe a bottle, right? Depends on how vigorous the vine is. But generally, what we do is, we'll do a micro fermentation, from the first fruit that we get. But that just gives us, very much a basic look
Yeah.
on the chemistry and how it ferments and that kind of thing. But to do, real experimentation on things like skin contact, you need more fruit. Um, so this particular variety, we've got about 8 vines that we worked with to do this work.
Yeah.
So it was a decent amount of fruit.
Okay. Yeah.
for a grape breeder anyway.
Right.
Relative.
Yeah, I mean that I have this theory that just like I think I'm starting to develop, and I think other winemakers develop over time, this ability to like taste a grape in the vineyard and sort of be able to,
Sure.
translate that into in their head into like what this will take, how will translate into the glass. I have
Sure.
this theory that
Right.
you breeders are doing the same thing, where you're able to sort of, make one little one bottle of something from one vine and be like, if we could do X, Y, and Z with it, this would end up tasting like this, where you're like actually extrapolating it to a larger volume and everything else.
Right.
Do you guys find that you have developed some special skills with wine tasting over the years because of the limitations?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a couple pieces to that. Certainly just the basics, right? Acidity, sugar content, tannin, these special aromatics. There's certain things you're gonna be able to pick up. Muscat you're gonna be able to pick up. Some fruit characteristics you're gonna be able to pick up. But the other side of it, that there's a lot that you're not gonna be able to pick up until you ferment the grapes.
Yeah.
Working on things that grapes that are producing precursors, thiol precursors, right? You're not going to necessarily pick that up in the fruit. I mean, you're not going to pick it up in the fruit. So those are always fun. We have some hybrids with Sauvignon Blanc that some of them get the trait where they produce a lot of aromatic thiol precursors that the yeasts convert to the wonderful things that we like to give the gooseberry and the passion fruit aromas.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not going to taste the grape and say, oh, this tastes like passion fruit, right? Because that doesn't come till you have the marriage of the yeast and the fruit chemistry in during fermentation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
the other thing that's interesting, you mentioned that tasting the grapes. So the other thing that actually you'll start tasting eventually is the stems.
ah,
Right. So one thing that we've really found with some of our hybrids is the importance of using stems during fermentation. So hybrid grapes do a lot of times tend to be low in tannin, but what we found is that a lot of the hybrids that we have actually really clean flavors in the stems and tremendous amount of tannin in the stems.
plus I'm if I'm not mistaken, a lot of hybrids have high acid,
Correct. Yes,
Hmm.
so
absolutely.
you get a double benefit from stems,
Absolutely right. Yeah,
potentially.
yeah. So if you're growing straight vinifera and you go to do a full stem inclusion wine, you're adding a lot of tartaric acid just to make sure your pH doesn't go too high, right? But yeah, so we can have we actually do have one variety that the acid is on the higher side, um, over over 10 grams per liter,
There you
but
go.
the stems, the potassium from the stems helps to drop some of that out.
Yeah, wild. Now, can you talk a bit about what you've accomplished in the 20 years that you've been doing this? Where you are at this point
Sure.
with the business? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So right now, in terms of where we are with the hybrids, we have a handful of varieties that we're moving into commercialization. Um, we just started a relationship with the nursery in New York. So you probably know Amberg grapevines. Used
Yep,
to be
that sounds really
grafted
familiar.
grapevine in New York.
Yep.
Yes, we started a relationship with them. So great folks. Eric and Sandra Amberg, and they're going to be propagating some of our varieties
Yeah.
specifically. But so we started out the grape breeding here in our home in Kent, Ohio, in really literally in the backyard. Um, Quickly ran out of space. Uh, let me put it this way: I ran out of space that Holly
You
allowed me
allocate.
to
You were
allocate.
allocated. Yes.
Because we're here, we're in a neighborhood, we're on actually
Right.
on
Yeah.
thankfully we're in a cul-de-sac lot, so the backyard's big, right, which helps.
Yep.
Right.
But still, there's only so much space.
Right.
But it was a great place to start because our particular location in Kent, number one, Kent's quite a ways away from the lake, so there's no lake influence,
Yeah.
moderating influence of the lake. So growing season is fairly short compared to the Grand River Valley.
Where Geneva is located.
Where
For those
Geneva,
that don't-
yes,
Yeah.
right,
No,
up where our research vineyard is
we're
today.
close to Lake Erie up there.
And where we're at in Kent is also a low spot in Kent, right? So we'll regularly be 5 degrees cooler, on a
Oh,
still winter or late or spring or fall day, right? So frost was definitely more of a challenge here, which was great when we were starting because it helped us select some really good vines to start with.
nice. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
So
we go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I said we quickly ran out of space here, and then purchased the property in Geneva in Harpersville Township. We looked for, I don't know, a few years. It probably took us a good 4 years to find the property up there.
Yes.
But it's a beautiful location. I don't know if you know much about the Grand River Valley, but from Lake Erie, you come in off of Lake Erie. Lake Erie is around 600 feet of elevation. And it's all glacial, right? The Great Lakes are, carved out by the glaciers as they receded. And coming in off of Lake Erie, there's a couple ridges, right? So there's a ridge that goes up to about 850 feet, and then just south of that ridge is the valley or the gorge where the Grand River flows. And then just south of that, on the other side, is another ridge. So the majority of the wineries in Ohio are located in the Grand River Valley, and I think a lot of the people that grow there would say that's probably the best place to grow grapes in Ohio. And so we're on that. Our property up there is on the ridge on the north side of the Grand River.
Okay, lovely. But that's beautiful.
It
Yeah,
is,
it is.
because there's a constant, really a constant airflow. So you get the air that comes in off the lake,
Comes up the valley.
Yep, up over
Mhm.
the ridge and down into the Grand River Gorge. So airflow is quite good there, which is helpful from disease and frost standpoint both.
Yeah.
And then it's just a beautiful area. Lots of other wineries there, and lots of friends that we've met and people that we've learned from as we kind of go along this process. But we, that property when we bought it had a Concord vineyard on it. Was about
7 acres.
about 7 acres.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it had a Welch's contract. Right.
That's a lot of Concord. Yeah, I was going to say
Yeah.
that's a lot of Concord.
We were dropped into a Welch's contract, and we actually took occupancy in
April.
April.
So right.
And the vineyard had not been pruned.
Oh boy.
Right.
So we scrambled. We were scrambling. Number one,
you knew this though when you were buying it, though, right? Like
we knew we were buying it, but we couldn't. And we kept hinting at it with the people who owned it, and we really...
And something fell through, I think, with the pruning or something on their end or something.
Yeah,
they were trying
they didn't
to
want to spend that money since they were selling, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I totally understand that, right?
Yeah.
So that was it was a fast learning curve. Did a lot of pruning. Had to quickly hire some people, which some friends in the area helped us with to get the vineyard pruned. And it was tedious pruning because buds had pushed. It wasn't like you could just manhandle the vines.
Oh yeah.
From that, we just stripped everything off, and so it was challenging. So we went through all that work, and then there was a frost. There was like a bad frost. Oh. So one of the years it was probably I think to this day we've been there for 10 years now. We've had the site
12 years now. Yeah,
12 years now.
Going 12. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think to this date that's still the worst frost we've had.
Okay.
And so went through all that work, and then we lost a bunch of the crop to frost.
Wow.
It's a bummer.
So we learned and pruned better, and then got a bumper crop the following year, which was actually the last year that we grew the Concord grapes. So
got it.
But over time, we took the Concord vines out, and have been working on developing the land for the use for high quality wine grapes. A lot of soil preparation, drain tile installation, new trellis installation. So 7 acres was there today. Again, the grape breeding has only taken over about 1 acre total.
Okay.
So grape breeding doesn't take a ton of well, it depends on the level, but if you're just one or two people doing grape breeding, and it's not your full time job, you're not going to be able to do much more than a couple acres.
Right. That sounds right. So, well, let me ask you a stupid question. Wouldn't it make sense, or wouldn't you want the breeding area to be in a terrible location where you have like the worst frosts and the worst pest pressure and stuff like that? I guess, well, maybe the bigger question is what are your objectives? I mean, you can feel free to answer that initial question too, but then I
Sure.
guess it just occurred to me this could lead into a segue for you to talk about what your objectives in breeding are.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, maybe let's start with that. So our objectives in breeding, when we started, and really our goal is to breed grapes that are suitable for our region. Um, One thing that you'll learn, from grape breeders, you can only breed for where you live.
Right.
You can't. It's tough to breed for anywhere but where you live. You can develop grapes, and if you develop one that's not quite suited for you, you can always send it to somebody else to try it somewhere. But through the only way you're going to get something that's suitable for somebody else is through those kind of collaborations. But the vast majority of the work and the progress that you're going to make is going to be breeding for where you live.
Yeah, just ask
So
most of the world who are growing grapes that were bred in Europe.
exactly right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good point.
And they ain't doing so great
Right. Good
without a
point.
lot of help.
But here, what is right? It's cold hardiness and it's disease resistance.
Okay, that's what
This
you're
is
going for.
yeah, right. So
And obviously the baseline is it has to taste good. Like
For
right,
sure.
like I mean, you could probably get disease resistance and hardiness and it would
oh
be
sure,
sterile, like it wouldn't grow even
no,
grapes at all or
absolutely.
whatever.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I can go out into the woods nearby and find a wild grape, and I'm going to have disease
ta-da!
resistance and cold hardiness. And
Yeah.
Job done.
yeah, but I think it's really important for us to develop grapes that make wine that really is world class,
Yeah,
right? I mean that's our objective, and we want to have grapes that have the cold hardiness and the disease resistance that allows them to be, to basically explore terroir that hasn't been explored yet,
yeah,
right? The only way you can explore terroir in wine is to have vineyards that have been around for a long time, right? So if I plant,
yeah.
I can plant Cabernet, I can plant Cabernet Franc, I can plant any vinifera I want on our site, up in the Grand River Valley, but
Right.
once, twice in my lifetime, there will be a killing event, right? It will get cold enough to where the grapes will die and the vineyard will have to be replanted. So it's going to be very difficult to get grapes there that are ever old enough that you're going to really start to express the combination of what the variety can deliver, and what the site can perfect.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the age and the time that it takes to express terroir. And I remember being at a Bordeaux tasting and talking to one of the French guys who had come over to pour his wines, and he was like, in Bordeaux, we don't even talk about terroir until the vines are at least 20 years old.
Sure. Yeah.
And and then you compare that to like, I mean, I feel like now the lifespan of a grapevine commercially is like maybe 25 to 30 years before
Right.
they're considered, not productive enough for use. And
Sure.
then and there's like a stark contrast to me there of what it really takes to actually, you know, translate a piece of land through a vine versus what our commercial objectives seem to be and how at odds they are.
Sure.
I mean, not everybody, obviously, but that's just, this is something to think about, I guess. It's an interesting
Right.
thing when considering what you're doing and how you're growing it. And yeah. So do you, do you look for specific characteristics in the wines? Like, are you breeding with a goal? How do I put this? Like, are you, obviously you're looking for really world-class fine wine as a result of whatever you're doing. But are you looking for anything specific other than like white versus red, or you know what I mean? Do you look at what's around you, for example, what's being grown around you, and be like, you know what, nobody's really got a good Gris here, and we should try to breed a Gris or something like that. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there. I don't know if those
Sure.
kind of things come into
Yeah, I
play.
mean, there's definitely some of that, right? There's definitely some of, what is available, in the current commercially available wine grapes that can be grown sustainably in our area,
Right.
right? What can I what could I buy? What grapes could I get? And what kind of wine do they make? There's certainly a lot of that, but then I think there's even just some broader categories. Um, really, full-bodied red wine is a challenge. That's been a challenge for hybrid grapes for a long time.
Yeah.
And honestly, a lot of the greatest wines on the planet and that people celebrate and I personally enjoy myself are that. Um,
Yeah.
and I would very much like to deliver grapes like that.
Got it. Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of, whole cluster. I shouldn't say whole cluster in terms of like carbonic, but full stem inclusion, put it that way.
Yeah.
Foot stomped Syrah, for example. Um,
Mm.
we and Hane both. We love those wines.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so the fact that we can go down that path with some of our hybrids and see the effect of the stem inclusion and see the tannin development and the complexity of the body of the wine change dramatically by doing that is very fulfilling. But yeah, I think generally we look for things that aren't currently available, and honestly, we kind of aim towards the kind of wines that we like.
Yeah.
We like full-bodied reds. We like good Chardonnay, and I think probably both of us have been tilted towards more unoaked since our early experiences early in our wine drinking.
You OD'd.
Right,
You OD'd on
exactly.
oak. Yeah.
But then also things like like Gewürztraminer. I'm a big fan of
Hmm.
Gewürztraminer.
Oh
And
yeah.
especially Alsatian Gewürztraminer.
Yeah.
Just that really. I guess I like wines with a lot of viscosity. I guess that's what I'm hearing
Yeah.
myself
There's a
say.
theme. Yeah.
Definitely a theme.
Well, it's I just had, it's funny, I was just pruning today. I was just drinking a oaky Chardonnay before we got on here. There's a lot of things a lot of things that are happening. I mean, by no intention, these all just fell into place because I don't know, whatever, they were on the schedule. And then I just had the fortune to go taste a bunch of delicious hybrids like Traminette, which comes from Gewürztraminer, and I
Yep,
was like,
that's good.
and then I was at I was at Vitinor where Itasca. I went to an Itasca panel, which is and then La Crescent as well, both of which are very floral, very perfumey, very viscous. I think. I mean, to me, they just had a lot going on, and yeah, I don't even know what I'm saying other than I I am a big fan of those as well. I guess is what I'm saying there, and I.
Hmm.
Sounds like we need to get together and drink some wine at some point.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what I was leading for. I was just setting it up so you could. No, I think the other thing is, and I've already said this, so I don't want to bore people, but the quality of the wines that I've been tasting that have been hybrids have just been. I mean, there's just no difference between them and vinifera. Like I don't even.
Great.
Yeah, like and so I wonder where you guys are with that in terms of what you've encountered out in the world, in terms of your experiences talking to people, and where geographically, if you notice differences as you're talking to people about their attitudes and opinions about the grapes that you're working with, and just the whole idea of breeding, a hybrid grape.
Right.
Have you encountered any just naysayers or
Oh,
anything that's
definitely.
like, okay,
Definitely.
what have you
I'd
encountered? I'm
say
really curious.
the majority. I would say the majority of the years that we've been doing this, there have been more naysayers than proponents,
Oh
and
wow.
and I think just generally, and I'm not saying just people we know. A lot of people we know, of course, are very supportive of what we're doing, but generally in the industry, I mean, the shift towards the interest in hybrid grapes and resistant grapes that people are beginning to realize as a sustainable path forward for the wine industry globally.
Hmm.
This is a new phenomenon. Um, really within the last, 5 years in any big way,
Yeah, it seems like it, right? It's
right?
it's
I mean,
really
everybody's starting to freak out about it now. And quite frankly, thank goodness there are people breeding grapes.
yeah.
Man, I'm not just us, but other people, lots of people,
Right, of
right?
course. Yeah. No, for
You
real,
know,
for real.
we're doing it kind of the old fashioned way, but there's plenty of other people that are doing, marker selected breeding, targeting specific,
Yeah,
genes
no,
and understanding what
yeah.
they are and
There's
being able to select things faster.
yeah, interinstitutional cooperation now,
Absolutely.
the Vitus Gen 2 program. Um,
But
I
when we started, it's funny because I think the best example is, when we first started, we went to, I think it was what was it, the Ohio Wine and Grape Conference. I
Conference.
think that's what it's called. And we had just started this, right? And so we're
yeah,
talking to anybody we can. And so I managed to find Arnie Esterer, right, who is unfortunately no longer with us, but he's a legend here in Ohio.
hmm.
I don't know if you know of him, but
Arnie
he started
Esther?
Arnie Esterer. He started Marco Vineyard uh, uh,
Out in
up in
Conneaut.
out in Conneaut, Ohio.
Ohio.
No, don't
Right?
know him,
And
but
he studied, he studied under Dr. Constantine Frank in the Finger Lakes,
oh, okay, sure, yeah,
right? And of course, there, the idea was you can grow vinifera, and Dr. Frank said you can grow vinifera in the Finger Lakes. And
right,
then what Dr. Frank told Arnie Esther was you can grow vinifera in Ohio.
right,
So Arnie really was the father of vinifera growing, in winemaking in Ohio, right? And so I met Arnie, and I'll never forget that. I talked to him. I told him about what we were doing. I said, yeah, we're starting to breed grapes, and we're going to have cold hardy, disease resistant grapes that make great wine, and we're going to have a winery up here, and we're going to be able to make wine that's you can't get anywhere else on the planet. And he told me, he said, well, why don't you just grow what everybody else is growing that works, right?
does it
That's
work?
what he said. Well, it's interesting because that was 20 years ago ish.
Yeah,
Fast forward to 2014, 2015, we have the polar vortex come through, right?
yeah,
Vinifera vineyards were just so many just wiped
right,
out. We got to here in Kent, we got to 36 and in Geneva, both 36 minus 36 Fahrenheit,
right,
right? Which is, we don't get that very often. You talk to people in other parts of the country, they say, oh, we get there every year, but we don't get there very often.
Right.
yeah,
But if you're growing vinifera, if you get to minus 36, forget about it,
yeah. The
right?
vines
It's
just
done.
explode. Yeah,
Yeah, the vines explode. The only thing that's
Mhm.
alive is the rootstock. Right? So you got a bunch of rootstock vines in your vineyard. So
right,
after that experience, so we had conversation with Arnie along the way. After that experience, he became incredibly interested in what we were doing. Incredibly, and he became
Right.
this big advocate actually for us locally, and
well,
I
good.
really thank him for that.
I mean, and I mean, I'm laughing. I'm sort of laughing at him, but really, like, props to him for being able to change his mind. And
Right.
Absolutely,
Right.
yeah.
yeah, like that's fantastic. Yeah, I mean,
And honestly, and his what he did for the industry, tremendous.
For
Growing the
sure.
wine industry, tremendous. His wines, fantastic.
Yes.
And as a mentor, not maybe not mentor, definitely somebody I learned from, and as a friend, great guy, and he's very much missed.
yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
That's a great story too. I mean, it's really. I mean, I think that is maybe these extremes are what is waking people up to this need.
Sure.
Because it seems. I mean, because I'm also seeing more recently learning about the crazy extent to which we continue to go to grow vinifera like under geotextiles.
Oh my goodness gracious, yes.
In those
Mhm.
northern climates where it's like, yeah, I'm just like, man, like, which leads into why maybe people should. I think you guys have this great idea about how there should be regional breeders, basically. And I just want to clarify, we did say grape breeding, right? We're not talking about you as breeders, period. Just we're talking about grape breeding. Sorry.
Absolutely, great
Yes.
breeding.
Okay.
We got two kids
Um,
though, so
okay, good. All right, beautiful. So there's multiple dimensions.
Right.
Um, so the this you have this idea of like support your local breeder basically, and that
sure,
every region should sort of send resources to help promote this work of a breeder or a group of breeders who are working to improve the genetic stock for that region. I
sure.
love this idea. Do you want to talk more about where this came, what your thoughts are about that? Because I'm probably butchering it.
Yeah, so I think at a high level, one of the challenges is that a lot of the great breeding that's done is done by institutions, right? Done by
Hmm.
universities, which is great, number one. But sometimes a university will have a breeding program, and then interests change in the university, and funding goes away, and stuff gets lost. Or you know, or you have private breeders who are doing the work, right?
Yeah.
People like us, and typically if you have a private grape breeder, they're doing it as a hobby, right? Because there's really today there's really not a good way to make a living as a grape breeder, and it's
Right.
for a couple of reasons. One, it takes a long time, right? So to be a great breeder, you have got to be willing to put in uh, at least 10 years of effort before you're going to see anything out of it, and that's honestly would be very fast.
Right.
So really, typically, if you breed a grape, what does a university do? They'll breed grapes, they'll patent a variety, and then they'll release the variety. And even some private grape breeders do this. Tom Plocker does this, right? Release the variety through a nursery, and then patented variety, and then when the nursery sells the grapes, a royalty gets paid back to uh, the breeder, whether it's the university or the grape breeder or the grape breeding company, whatever it happens to be. So the question is for private grape breeders, how do you make that sustainable? My personal thoughts on the patent approach, I deal with patents all the time in my day job,
Uh-huh.
um, all the time, and patents last 20 years. Whether you got a patent on a electronic doodad that you made, or some new chemistry that you made, or on a new grape that you made, patent lasts 20 years. 20 years for a breeding grapes, or 20 years in the life of a new variety is nothing.
Hmm.
Right.
You're barely going to get that many grapes in the ground, and or any kind of understanding about the varieties. Um, so the patent approach is challenging, and there's an expense. Obviously, there's an expense to getting patents. So really, I think there's a need for a new business model, to kind of allow people who want to breed grapes to realize a financial benefit if they develop something that really takes off, and for a longer period of time, and a larger benefit. And I can't say that I have my finger on the pulse of it and know exactly what that is right now. But what I do know is that with the technology that's now available, through blockchain, through NFTs, there are certainly mechanisms in place that would allow funding of great breeding exercises, great breeding effort, well into the winemaking process, even into the secondary market with wines. If they get to the point where you have a fantastic new variety that's becomes a collectible type wine that's sold and resold, there are mechanisms in place now that could allow you to connect that back to the great breeder. So these are things we're looking at, and things that we want to work with some other folks to develop and flesh out further. But I really do think there's a path.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting. I love that because I mean, I guess underneath all of that, from my perspective, is the value that grape breeders provide, or that food breeders provide in general
Oh,
to
sure.
our
Hmm.
survival, basically, or
Yeah,
our ability to just to adapt and change in a world of change. It's like
yeah,
it's literally the most necessary thing that seems to be absent right now
sure.
in the system that we consider wine, or that we consider other things. I mean, I know it's been happening in these universities. It's sort of like, there has been breeding happening, but I think the idea that you're pointing me to, and maybe you have share the same ideas, but it's like every region should have its own, breeder. I mean, I've said that everybody who has a vineyard should be breeding, in some way.
I know
Like,
I've heard you say that. Yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
and I really think that to a certain extent, because I think it's just how it's a shift in mindset. Instead of being like, there is this one thing that is a market commodity that I must produce, it's like, no, I'm going to adapt and grow what grows well, and so I always have
Yeah.
to be adapting and selecting. And so your whole thought, your whole process, your whole perspective on what you're doing as a viticulturalist, as an agriculturalist, changes from capitalizing on a commodity to participating in each ecological process that never ends. You don't
Hmm.
win the gold ring in agriculture. You're always moving forward. You're always progressing and
Sure.
changing. um
Yes.
anyway, I'm riffing, but uh I know that I think the next level up is this idea that you guys are talking about, which is like, still there's thousands of breeders around the country, because there's at least one for every region, because like you said, it's like, we need somebody who's helping us develop that genetic stock that is well adapted to our right where we live, because of course
Sure.
terroir and microclimate and everything else comes into play. And like you said, it then we have this diverse thing. Like, it develops diversity, which also just creates resilience to a wine industry. It also creates uniqueness. I think you pointed at that, but it's that
Absolutely.
idea of like, I don't know if we talked about, I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast, but I think you and I talked about it when we talked before, Aaron, about how, rather than chasing like the next cult cab thing, a millionaire or a billionaire who wanted to make their mark, like, why not invest in a proprietary breed of grape? Like, why, instead of
Absolutely
chasing
right.
something that everybody else is doing, name it after you. Like, like, breed a grapevine that literally, that you're the only person in the world that has it, and then your wine is unique in the world, and then you have something special.
Sure.
You're not just like another 99 point Cabernet from Napa. You're like,
Mhm.
you're the Aaron and Holly Paula, grape, whatever, wine, whatever.
Sure. Right. Right.
If not saying that you guys are billionaires with big egos, but if you
But
were,
yeah,
you could name it after yourselves or your child or whatever. You could name it anything you wanted, and it would be yours. And it
right.
just baffles me that that's like, if you have the money to burn, why not do that instead of just
Sure. Right.
doing
Right.
what everybody else is doing? Anyway, I'm repeating myself, but
No, but I absolutely agree, and it's funny because we've actually had conversations with wineries in the past. So one of the things, obviously, we're going down the path with our breeding. There's certain things that we want to accomplish, but we've also had conversations with winery owners in the past about exactly what you're saying. Basically bespoke development of new
right.
varieties, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it
Hmm.
be great if you had a variety of your own that exists only in your vineyard? And we I can't say that we've had success with that model yet, but we've definitely had some interest. So I think I think we will eventually find some people, and I expect that we would be contacted by some people at some point, or meet somebody who says, "Wow, that's really cool. I'd like to have a grape of my own. Can you help me
Well,
with this?"
let
And
me ask you this.
we're excited about that opportunity.
Could you, I mean, maybe this is how you're approaching it, but what I'm imagining you're saying is, somebody comes to you and says, hey, could you develop for me something that's a cross of this and is a little like this, and then and then I only want it to be for me, and so they pay a special fee for that. but
Exactly. Yeah.
but I'm wondering, again, because you were talking about like the limits of making money through the patent system. What if, as you just develop these, you sort of try to sell them to individual
Yes.
vineyards? You know what I mean? And just be like, hey, we have something coming out that has these characteristics. It's already proven, it's resistant. You don't need to spray it, and it's delicious. Here's some wine that you can taste from it. If you'd like to own this, here's the big price tag that you can pay, and
Exactly.
literally nobody else in the world can have this. Only you will have it. And of course, we'll keep like the negatives, but I don't know, I'm using a
Sure.
photography
Yeah. No. Definitely.
analogy, but you know what I mean? Like, you'll keep the genetic, fingerprint of that in your vineyard, because you'll continue to work with it, but they will be the only person in the world that gets that.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's definitely a thing that something that we've thought of. Even taking a step earlier than that in the process. So you can imagine if you had, let's say you make a cross, and you have whatever 500 seedlings, right?
Yeah.
And let's say you go through your first year process, and you get rid of all the ones that are definitely problematic, or maybe it's 2 years, and you end up with, let's say you end up with 20 vines, right? That you're then going to continue to grow to the point that you're going to see what kind of fruit it has, monitor disease and cold resistance or whatever over several years, right?
Mm-hmm.
At that point where you have those 20 candidate vines, we've even thought about allowing people to buy a share or adopt a vine at that point, right?
Right. Right.
And if something were to ever come of that vine, they're purchasing early an opportunity to share in the profitability of that variety in its future.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah. I mean, I just love talking about these things because in some way I think it actually could promote grape breeding. And if that
Right,
is the
exactly.
result of this, because people see a way to make money out of this for all of a sudden, then boom, we've won. You know what I mean? The world has
Right.
won.
Sure,
Right.
exactly.
Oh, I love that.
Now, I think maybe I'll just go back to something real quick that you said a minute ago. Talking about great breeding as a way to deal with the effects that we're seeing with the change of the climate, and expanding the capability of being able to produce world class wines in different areas. I don't really. I think we don't really look at it necessarily as we're doing this so that winemaking survives, right?
Yeah, go on,
I,
please.
I look at it as we're doing this so that people anywhere on the planet can have an absolutely phenomenal experience with a glass of wine. Not just about so that there's wine available for people to drink, but so that those wines are available that are just really memorable experiences in people's lives in
So
different
there's
places. It's not just about surviving, it's about thriving. It's about giving people experiences that they remember.
I love that. Yeah, that's a really good point, and I appreciate that. Let me ask you something real just fun. How many seedlings have you planted over the last 20 years?
Ooh.
Oh, okay. Let me think about that one. So,
A lot.
I should have,
a
yeah,
lot. Well,
I should have prepped you for that one so you could have
yeah,
done
I
some
don't
Right.
know if I've done this math. So, I would say on a given year, we probably do uh, anywhere from 40 on a slow year to maybe twice that many, maybe up to 80 or 90
Okay.
crosses.
Crosses.
Crosses like this vine crossed with that vine,
Seriously?
hybridization. Yes.
Then you're
And
getting,
then
whoa.
and then
Okay.
each of those we probably get on average, I would say on average 50, at least 50 seeds usually
Okay.
to a couple hundred seeds.
Right.
So I don't know
Right.
that math, but it's a big number. Trying to
Let's
think
Yeah.
see.
50, 100, 50.
Well, let's take
I
it
would say
real.
seedlings. I would say maybe somewhere around 3,000
Mhm.
to 6 or 7,000 seedlings we would
Yeah, I
start
was gonna say the average
a
looks like
year.
5,000, and that's
Yeah,
per year. So yeah, you're at like 100,000 maybe easily, possibly.
yeah, something like that.
And
But the thing is, I mean, I can't remember where I saw it, but I remember somebody threw a number at it one time, like how many seedlings do you have to grow to come up with a grape variety that is in some way more useful than its parents, right?
right,
For the, for the,
right, right.
and the number that the person said was 1 in 10,000.
Okay,
So 1 in 10,000, where would that put us? We're in it. So right
10.
now, I would say we've got, yeah, it would be less than, it'd be 10, no more than that. So,
Yeah,
Mhm.
and we've got for sure three that we know that we like, that, pretty much we know we're going forward with, and we're going to plant in our vineyard here, and grow and make wine here in the Grand River Valley. Um, and maybe another half a dozen that are approaching that point. So I think that
so
number is probably pretty close.
that's pretty close. Plus, you've been planting the last couple of years, and still have to wait and find out what actually
Sure.
happens with those. So you might get another one or two out of the last couple of years of planting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
The, the,
guessing.
the, the hard part with the grape breeding is the first 5 years.
Yeah, we're just
Um,
waiting.
right, it's just waiting,
Mhm.
right? It's just waiting, and then after that, you got something new happening every year. So that's some of the funnest stuff, right? Going out in the vineyard, and seeing the first fruit of a new variety,
Right.
because it's
Mhm.
like, and I think Tom mentioned it when you talked to him. Grapes, when you breed grapes, the genes they get really all jumbled up. Um, so within a seed lot of a given cross, there's going to be there can be quite a range of what you get. Um, yeah, so it's pretty exciting.
And these varieties that you have, are they varieties that you feel like what are their characteristics? I was going to say, are they varieties that you would feel
Yeah,
confident giving to somebody in your region and saying you don't have to spray this with anything? Like, is it that level of resistance, or what would you what tell me about them? What are you where are they
I would
at in
say
terms
I
of?
would say of the three that we have, I would say one of them I would say has a shot at being a no spray in our
Okay,
region. The other two would be certainly minimal spray. A couple spray if you're using traditional sprays, a non-organic spray,
yeah,
you may only have to spray them once or
okay,
twice at the most. And certainly, no issues with a organic approach or biodynamic approach.
yeah. It's funny.
Yeah.
I was at a vineyard in Vermont, and they were trying to farm. I think it was Louis Swenson organically, and discovered that it had an intolerant. It didn't tolerate sulfur or copper, so they
Yeah,
basically
yeah,
defoliated it when they sprayed it. Which so
yeah.
they
Wow.
they stopped spraying organic. They switched from organic to not organic for that.
Right, that's true. I mean,
I
yeah,
mean,
some of the organic stuff can be pretty tough. I mean, we
yeah,
call it organic, but you're spraying sulfur, you're spraying, copper sulfate, and those can be pretty tough on some of the varieties.
yeah. Um,
But yeah, I
well,
mean, the grapes we didn't talk about it, but the varieties that we have.
yeah, if you'd
So
like to.
one
I
of
don't know how much you want to talk about it or how much is still under wraps until they are revealed or whatever,
Oh
but
no,
I'd love to hear I'd love to
we
hear
can talk
about
a
them.
little bit about it, but I definitely want to touch on some of the, what are we using in our breeding? What varieties are we using, right, in our hybridization work? So, we have first we have a vinifera breeding stock, right?
Yeah.
So, developing new wine grapes, we're starting with genetics that are coming in from vinifera.
Uh-huh.
Vinifera brings obviously fantastic genetics and fantastic traits for wine production,
Right.
because these are grapes. Your Cabernet, your Pinot Noir, your Chardonnay. These are grapes that have been tried and true in terms of wine quality for centuries, right?
Right. Right.
So there's no questioning this aspect. But of course, from a cold hardiness and disease resistance standpoint, they don't really bring much at all. So the challenge there is, what do we bring? What other grapes do we cross them with? So our work has basically been focusing on really three areas primarily. One is using some existing hybrids, in our program. Frontenac is one that we have used, which we really like, because it's cold hardy, it's very cold hardy, disease resistant, and it's easy to grow. It's actually quite easy to grow. Some maybe too easy to grow. um, and we started with Frontenac years ago when we first started getting into wine, and I wanted to try growing some of my own grapes in the backyard. I started with Frontenac, and since we had them, that was probably the reason why we started with it. But it has maintained a place in our breeding program. Um, and then the other ones are two American Native American species that really haven't been used much in grape breeding.
Mm.
So when you and those two species are Vitis longii and Vitis bicolor.
Ah,
So a lot of what you'll hear in terms of a lot of the cold hardy grape breeding that's been done, there's a lot of Vitis riparia,
right.
and certainly, Frontenac brings a large percentage. I think it's around 50, over 50, 58%, something like that. Maybe it's higher than that. Vitis riparia in its background, which is
Okay.
why it's very cold hardy.
Yeah.
But when we first, got into breeding, and I was introduced to grape breeding by a guy named Tony Bell, a grape breeder here in Ohio, who has passed. But he introduced me to grape breeding. I met him at Goodyear when I worked there in the R&D center, and he told me about Vitis longii. And Vitis longii is native to Texas, Oklahoma area. And it's interesting because it has some very interesting traits. It's incredibly cold hardy, really second only to Vitis riparia in its cold hardiness, which is kind of unusual considering where it's located.
Mm-hmm.
But some of those areas can get very cold
Yeah.
occasionally, right? So I think that occasionally thing is what has allowed it to adapt, over the years. This species to adapt over the years. Very neutral in terms of its aromatics and its flavor. If you taste a Vitis longii grape, you're just gonna say it just tastes like a grape. I mean, it doesn't taste. It doesn't taste what I would call welchy or foxy or herbaceous. It just tastes like fruit. Very
Huh.
clean. Has a
That
lot of
sounds
color.
cool.
Very sturdy and very upright. Incredibly upright growth,
Huh.
which is like really crazy upright growth.
Yeah, that sounds
um,
vinifera like.
yes, but it's actually way more upright than most vinifera.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, it's pretty wild actually to see one growing. And it grows almost more like a bush than a vine. It's
Okay.
interesting.
Huh.
It's only it does have higher acid, which a lot of the wild species do, which is not uncommon.
Right.
Its only major challenge is cluster size. It has really tiny grape clusters,
Mm.
and we're talking small berries with 20 grapes.
Right.
I mean, we're talking small clusters.
Yeah.
Um, and it tends to pass that trait down to some degree. A lot of times, this a pure species will do that just because it is so adapted, and its genetics are so deep from so many years of adaptation that a lot
Right.
of times they do tend to pass on their traits. But it has some really good things to pass along. And the other one is Vitis bicolor. Vitis bicolor is a native species that grows here in Ohio, and you'll find it further out east from here, a little bit further south, and over. I think they have it in Wisconsin, as far as Wisconsin in terms of cold hardiness.
Okay.
Vitis bicolor is interesting because it's one of the few cold hardy grape species here that can have significant tannin in the fruit. So there's a range. If you go out
Mm.
and you look at different, you go out in September, October, and you just wander around looking for bicolor vines and start tasting grapes, you find some that have no tannin, and you'll have other ones that have more tannin than you've ever tasted in a fresh grape. Um,
Wow.
so we actually spent, I say we spent the better part of about 5 years trying to find really good examples of Vitis bicolor. Um, and we did manage to find one that's really very core in our program now. Um, we found that vine actually in a neighborhood that was being developed not too far from where we live, and the vine um, we ended up having to take grapes from that vine and plant seeds to grow them out, because one of the issues with Vitis bicolor is that it's very difficult, almost impossible, to grow it from a dormant cutting. You
Oh.
can get it sometimes from green cuttings, but at the time we were doing this, our growing cuttings from green cutting skills were not what they are today. Uh, so we planted some seed, and um, it's funny. The other thing we learned about bicolor is that uh, for whatever reason, when you plant a bunch of seed, you would think that you would get on average half males, half females. For whatever reason, with Vitis bicolor, that's not the case. You get far more males than females. Um,
Wild.
yeah, it is kind of wild. I'm not sure that why that is, but that's been a topic on the great breeders list, which is actually something we haven't talked about. But there's actually an email list of great breeders.
Is this a
That
Google?
Yeah,
Uh,
it's a Google group. Yeah, started out
I
as a
just
list.
got accepted this week. I've
Oh,
started. My
perfect.
inbox is
Okay, so
full.
Bill let you in. So we'll see
uh,
you on there. But
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. I'm going to keep my
tremendous
mouth shut
folks
for a
on there. I
while.
encourage anybody who's interested in grape breeding to seek out the Great Breeders List. I think it's actually called Great Breeders List as a
Yeah.
Google group, and join, because all the private grape breeders, a lot of them are on there, and a lot of sharing of information. people have, share cuttings, they share pollen. Sometimes if somebody has a vine and they want to do a cross and somebody else has it, they'll do the cross for them and send them the seed. And so yeah, it's a great. I've learned so much from people on there.
I
Lon Rambaugh, Cliff Ambers, Bill Shoemaker, Mark
the
Hart, so many people.
the depth of knowledge on there is really staggering. Honestly,
Yeah,
it's
and
amazing.
absolutely
And I
true.
mean, and not just about breeding, which of course that's like crazy, like for me, because it's a whole new thing, and I'm just like blown away by what the depth that these folks are at with it. And I'm sure, as you guys are, I'm sure you're right there with it. But when see people who know what they're talking about talking to each other and digging into these things, just like dizzying in a great way. But I
Yeah.
mean, it's beyond that. Like, I got some really great winemaking tips too. Just like
Oh,
people who, it's
definitely.
just a lot of minds who are, you know, thinking creatively about these things, and just like little nuggets will just pop out, like something you've never considered doing. You're just like, yeah, that's like an amazing solution to a problem that I just assumed was insolvable, and all of a sudden now I have this brilliant idea of a great, I mean, I don't know. There's all kinds of stuff. Like there's multiples of those already in just the first week. So I wouldn't even know where to begin to start
Yes,
listing them. But
definitely.
yeah, it's pretty incredible. Yeah, I would agree with you and recommend anybody check it out as well. And my question for you. Wait, I did have a question for you. In relation to this, it's not really a question, but just an observation that I'm hearing you talk about these traits, and it's not until you get into the breeding that you realize how many levers there are to pull in
Yes.
the genetic makeup of these creatures, and what that can do for wine. Because I mean, I think we're at a point where I feel like everybody's been fat and happy with vinifera for a while, but like, I mean, the possibility exists that like we could exceed that quality. Like there's a
Oh,
lot of
definitely.
stuff that we could do, and it's not just flavor. I mean, obviously, I think we could exceed that quality by having the same quality, but that wouldn't need to be sprayed, which would be wonderful. Like, um,
Sure.
and but I mean, there are things like just specific pests that will really attack certain things, and you can by observing what the way different vines perform under, say, the pressure of Japanese beetle, you'll begin to realize, oh, these vines aren't being eaten, and maybe we should look at that vine and figure out what's going on with it and breed it in and see if we can get some
Mhm.
kids from that vine that have the same trait. And then the other thing, I just went through a whole panel at Vineyard about acclimation rate and deacclimation rate in vines, and all these studies that had been done to show. And just to break that down for anybody that doesn't know what that means, it's as the vine goes dormant, it's the speed at which it goes dormant and then comes out of dormancy. So it acclimates to winter dormancy and deacclimates from winter dormancy. And you can breed, and apparently rupestris is one that has a very slow reacclimation or deacclimation rate. So therefore, the benefit of that is, as we have more of these unseasonable weather changes, so like a sudden warm spell in March or February in a cold climate where it's 70 degrees for a couple weeks, all of a sudden
Right,
um
right.
the certain vines will start coming out of dormancy, and then when the temperature drops again, you kill all the new buds. And so if you have something that isn't tricked by those couple weeks at 75 in February, and is a lot slower to come out of dormancy, it won't start pushing, it'll wait longer, and then it'll be protected when that you get the frost on after that. So it's
Yeah.
just, these kind of things are just really fascinating. And anyway, rupestris was that one that apparently has the slow deacclimation rate that I found out about. But so
Yes.
many
Yeah.
Yeah.
different things, so much in our native genetics here in North
Yeah.
America to
Absolutely.
play with. um,
Yeah. And so, and Vitus, I'd say Vitus Longi is definitely an earlier butter, but
uh-huh.
it's not as fast to deacclimate as Riparia, at least in my
Oh,
experience.
interesting.
And then Vitus
Interesting.
bicolor is it's buds out much later.
Oh, okay.
Right. So,
Great.
some of the things that we're doing in our work is trying to combine, some of the best of those traits. Um, And the Vitis bicolor itself is actually very cold hardy as well. The vine that we have that we're working with primarily, that selection, survived the minus 36 Fahrenheit back in 2014, 2015, the polar vortex. Completely unscathed. It didn't care. It's
Right.
like it didn't happen, which is just amazing.
Amazing. Yeah.
But you can imagine, right? So I've got Vitis longii, and I've got Vitis bicolor, and I've got a Vitis vinifera nursery, filled with world class, today's world class wine grapes, right?
Yeah.
Now, and that vinifera nursery, I've got a baby. I've got to make sure I keep it sprayed so that the
Yeah.
vines continue to have leaves.
Right.
And then I bury the vines in the winter because I
Uh-huh.
want to take a chance of them, getting
Right.
too cold and dying. So, because I've only got like one or two of each of these.
Right.
I can't really afford the space to have more than that.
Yeah.
So, world class vinifera, Vitis longii, Vitis bicolor. So you can imagine doing things like, crossing a vinifera with Vitis longii and crossing maybe a different vinifera with Vitis bicolor, selecting over several years, selecting the best of each of those groups, and then crossing those two back with each other.
Right.
Right. So you take that longii vinifera hybrid and the bicolor vinifera hybrid, cross those together. So what you end up with something that's 50% vinifera, 25% longii, 25% bicolor in the end, and hopefully bringing in the genetics that you want with the cold hardiness and the upright growth and the tannin and all these things that we're looking for. So that's part of the path that we're on.
Yeah. No, it's. Do you guys geek out when you're driving around and try to find obscure vines?
Yeah.
I mean, I would. I just
Constantly,
imagining I'd start
everywhere
collecting.
we go.
Yeah,
Asphalt,
like
everywhere we
Right,
go.
right.
Somewhere we haven't been before, we pull into a parking lot, and
you're
Right.
like,
the first thing I notice is what grapevines are growing around the parking lot or in the
yeah,
woods across the street.
yeah,
Vitis
Can't help
bicolor,
yourself, right?
you can.
yeah,
Vitis bicolor is one that you can't help but see once you start working with it, because as the name entails, it gets a name because of the appearance of the leaves. So
Mhm.
so the top of the leaves are this
uh,
nice dark deep green, and the bottom is this powdery, somewhere between gunmetal blue and battleship gray color.
huh?
And you can imagine. So you've seen like Concord. You've seen some of the Labrusca. They have that kind of powdery tan
Yeah,
underside of the leaf.
yeah.
So imagine something that looks like that, but instead of tan, it's like a gunmetal blue color. So when
Huh.
you see bicolor, and especially if it's windy, I mean, you can't help it. I mean, it goes from these colors, you can't miss it. Right? You drive by it on the highway, you can't
Oh,
miss
oh, it's sort of like a silver maple in that sense. Like,
it.
do you know
Yes,
what I'm?
that's a
That's
good
good.
it's a good
Yeah.
Okay.
analogy.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's very cool. Oh yeah, look at that.
But and I told you
Looking at
before
pictures.
how much I dislike the maple analogy for Vitis longii that came out. But Vitis longii, its name was official name was changed to Vitis acerifolia, which
Okay.
means maple leaf grape, because
Right.
somebody thought the leaves looked like
Mm.
maple tree leaves. I
Oh,
continue to call it Vitis longii because it was discovery was credited to a guy named last name Long, right? So
right. Okay.
Stephen Harriman Long, who was a American explorer, right? Explored the Great Plains and had a crew of people that really risked their lives to explore our country and map our country. And he
Right.
had a botanist with them who cataloged things that they saw and found and took cuttings, and basically was certainly responsible for isolating the very vine that we have growing in the backyard, from the early 1800s.
Right.
So I like to continue to credit the guy who discovered the grape.
Yeah, and I'll just say I'm looking at pictures, and if it looks like a maple leaf, then all grapevines look like a maple
Right,
leaf.
exactly.
It's not really. Yeah. Anyway, that's funny. Well, guys, thank you so much for sharing this time and this conversation. Is there? I know it's not like a traditional winery where you have things for people to like get in touch with you about or anything, but
Sure.
if you want to say your website or and if you do want people to get in touch with to ask questions or anything like that, is there a best way for that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, people can find us on our website. It's vineyardinnovations.com.
Great.
Can also go to Instagram at Vineyard Innovations. They can find us there. Um, feel free to reach out through either of those means. Certainly, anybody who's interested in breeding grapes and just wants to learn more about breeding grapes, happy to talk with anybody there. Anybody who's interested in specifically about any of our varieties, which maybe we can take another minute to talk about if you have time still.
Oh, yeah.
And then that would be great too. And and if there's, like you said, Adam, if there's that billionaire out there that wants to have a grape developed specifically for them, we're open for business.
Right.
Call us.
I said call us. So yeah.
Call us. Call, don't email.
Yeah, right.
So I think maybe I'll just quickly comment on the 3 varieties that we have.
Please. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. We got so caught up in what you were working with. I wanted to hear about
no
those.
worries.
Please
Yeah.
do.
So 3 varieties that, and right now, kind of the way we're operating is that there are some folks that we are working with that have these varieties already on trial. They have through cuttings from us, starting a small number of vines to get some experience with them, growing them and making wine.
Great.
But also these grapes will be available through Ambra grapevines here in the next couple years. Now, currently we have not named them yet. So in typical grape breeder fashion, they have very catchy names that consist of numbers and dashes and dots.
Yes. This is the one thing, if you start reading that, anybody who does take our advice and start reading that the online grape breeder list, the Google group, it does.
Right.
It's like, are people talking about dates like 7592?
Right.
What is going on? Like these just become famous numbers in a weird way because some of the stuff never gets named. It's funny.
Right. So a lot of grape breeders, when they have a selection, what they'll do is they'll give it a number, and that number is designated to a location in their vineyard. Whether it's
Right.
a plot, a block, and a row number, and a panel number, or something like that.
You guys have like a map, right? That you've sort of mapped where you've planted everything and numbered it.
Yeah. Well, we've got a map, but our nomenclature, actually, we base it on the year. So for example,
okay.
First one I would mention is 05-04.3. And so our nomenclature is the 05 is the year that the cross was made, right? So the cross was made in 2005. The 04 is the number of the cross that was made in that year. So let's say if we did 50 crosses that year, this was number 4 on the list.
Got it.
And then the .3, the 3 is the third seedling that was selected. So typically what we'll do is we'll start with a seed lot. And so we would have started off with like an 05-04 seedling lot, right? And we may have 20, 30 of those planted out in the vineyard. And we'll go through at least 1 full year, maybe 2 in the vineyard before we put the dot number at the end, right? So when we're down to like maybe, less than 20, we'll put that number at the end. So at one point in time, we had, several of this from the seed lot, but this is the only one that made it all the way through that we kept. And it's 05-04-3.
Got it.
This particular one is a direct descendant of Pinot Noir. So our objective when we bred this grape was twofold. One was to get the disease resistance and the cold hardiness that we were looking for, right? And that actually goes for anything that we're doing.
Right.
But the other one was to see if we could bring in improved, not even improved, because that's saying like there's something wrong with Pinot Noir color, but to bring in more color interest in Pinot Noir. Because we both, Holly and I we both really enjoy Pinot Noir. But Pinot Noir color can go anywhere from fairly dark to very, very light. And one thing that you'll typically hear from people who grow Pinot Noir, and really people who grow really good Pinot Noir, is that they will tell you that color doesn't matter in Pinot Noir. And the reason they tell you that is because Pinot Noir generally doesn't have good color. And so I think, they're kind of right. But in my mind, at the same time, if there was some super duper top secret way where they could make the same wine exactly the same as what they're making, but then also have really beautiful color every year, they'd
Hmm.
probably do it. So,
Mm.
and honestly, some people say color is not important in wine. I disagree. I really enjoy looking at wine. I enjoy the
Yeah.
depth of color, the different hues that you can get from wine. So that was kind of the goal with this variety.
Nice. Okay.
And it's actually has turned out very well. This variety produces wines with very deep color, uh, aromatics very reminiscent of Pinot Noir, a lot of cherry, forest floor, both red and black fruits. Both acidity is definitely on the higher side.
Hmm.
This one I think is the one I mentioned that has acidity will be over you know generally over 10 grams per
Hmm.
liter. This year, when we harvested it, Brix was 25, just over 25. Titratable acidity was 11.9,
Whoa.
right?
Yeah, that's
pH was 3.38.
wow.
So what we found is two things. Um, Actually, when you start working with a lot of the cold hardy hybrids, one thing you learn pretty quick is how to deal with the combination of high acidity and pH that's higher than you would expect it to be at that acid level.
Yeah.
So typically, what you want to do is you want to focus on the pH.
Yeah.
So it's important to get the pH where you want it to be, so that it ends up where you want it to be when you're done making the wine.
Right.
And generally, um, with what I've seen with a lot of the hybrids, is that the potassium that's present that's causing you that balance, that different balance, will actually take care of the extra acid, and it'll drop out
Right.
during the course of fermentation and aging.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, 3.38 isn't terrible pH. Like after fermentation, you'd be kind of in a sweet spot,
mhm.
potentially.
But what you find, if you're at 3.38 with that high of a TA, you've actually got to drop it. You've got to
Oh, good
drop it down
point.
to
Yeah.
3.3 before you start. So actually, something has a 11.9, you've got to add acid, which seems
Really?
crazy, but yeah,
Wait,
yeah, yeah.
why? Oh,
Just to
because just to get it even a little lower, because otherwise you'll
get
get
even
too high
lower,
after
because the
fermentation.
potassium
Yeah.
level's so high that your pH would end up higher than you wanted when you're done.
Right. Right.
So, and I say that especially because this is one where we do full stem inclusion. So
Right.
we're bringing in a lot of additional potassium in the stems.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, when those wines are done, the tannin is tremendous, and ends up actually being very nice quality tannin, very silky. You
And you
do
got the
get
color you wanted too.
and actually there's color to burn. So if there's any loss
Nice.
through the stem inclusion, it's you certainly don't notice it.
Got it.
So
All right.
and that one is not overly productive, which is another issue that you can run into with some hybrids. Um, when you do hybridization work, especially across species, right? You'll get what people refer to as hybrid vigor.
Yeah.
So sometimes you'll get these vines that just like grow like tank, and we've got lots of these, right? They just grow like tanks, and they
Yeah.
just want to produce, which becomes an issue from a quality standpoint. Um, but we tend to select vines that aren't overly productive, so that it's not so that it wouldn't be a tremendous challenge in the vineyard to keep to keep the crop level where you need it for high quality wine.
Right.
So that one's really disease resistant, very cold hardy. That particular vine, even though it's around 50% vinifera,
Uh-huh.
um, was cold hardy, fully cold hardy to 36 minus 36F with no
Wow.
damage. So very cold hardy grape.
Lovely.
We've got a white grape that's 07011, so cross made in 2007. That one has Riesling very prominent in its background. That's the one we talked about a little bit earlier, that we make with long skin contact, full malolactic fermentation. And we didn't talk about it, but malolactic fermentation on the skins, which is something that I've started playing with, which I think is actually really cool. I really like it,
Yeah.
because it kind of simplifies things a little bit too. But it's very interesting. Um, that one this year um, came in with a Brix of 22 and a half. 7.5 grams per liter TA, and 3.45 pH. So numbers for that one were great, spot on
Yeah,
for
lovely.
winemaking that we wanted. Um, the fruit itself is nice. It has that uh, same trait that Riesling has. When the grapes are exposed to the sun, they develop a golden color, and the aromatics just really, the terpene type aromatics really start to develop. So really nice grape. I did mention, but all these grapes too have been, you know, grown on their own roots. So that's
Yeah,
something that we look for in all of our, all of our hybrids. So good phylloxera resistance.
right.
And then the last one, 13-17-6. So the newest one, cross made in 2013. That one is a direct descendant of Petit Syrah.
Oh,
And I would say of the hybrids that we have so far, it has the largest clusters.
okay.
It is resistant to 20 - 20 F at least. It hasn't been tested colder than that. I expect it to be hardier than that based on what I know about its parents. But we definitely need another winter test to know for sure. But certainly
Right.
hardy enough for here, except for if we were to get it really really cold, we don't know for sure. This year
Okay.
that one had bricks of 20, just over 22, 6 grams per liter TA, and 3.48 pH.
Beautiful. Sounds lovely.
Yeah, so also really good chemistry. Aromatics in the wine, we haven't had as many trials with this in terms of winemaking, but good. This one actually has good tannin in the fruit, um, and you can actually make it very quite tannic if you include stems. So it is
Wow.
very much like what you would expect with Syrah or Petit Syrah in terms of that flexibility. Um, and just the aromatics in the fruit itself, a lot of black fruits. Uh,
Mm.
so looking forward to maybe doing some oak aging with this one at some point. Haven't done it
Yeah,
yet,
that
but I think it's suited for it.
sounds great. Yeah, so this is making me salivate and thirsty.
So what's funny is that the one thing that I honestly stress over more than anything right now, maybe that's a little of an exaggeration, but I stressed over a lot, is the naming process. Excuse me. Because we know these things as a number, right?
Right,
And then,
right.
like, okay, now we're gonna
Yeah, it
introduce
does.
these
Oh
grapes to the
man,
world. We got to call it something,
it does give it a personality, and you want to make sure that it's like not a negative. You don't want to skew it in a weird way. Yeah, I can imagine that would be
and you
tough.
don't
Plus,
want to have a misstep. You don't want to be a Nova or one of these. You don't want to have anything like
right,
that, right? You can't
right,
do anything.
right. Yeah, that's true. Oh God, you're
Hey,
right.
so maybe when I get to the point where I got a handful of possibilities for some of these, I'll run them past you, and
That would be
we can see
awesome.
what looks
Yeah.
like.
Because to me, this would be a lot of fun. But then, I don't have as much, I don't have the parents' concern for their children that you guys have. But I
Right.
would, I love the naming process, but I go through the same thing. Well, I don't know. It's because I've had to name all these bottles of wine. Like like dozens of bottles, every wine that we make is sort of different. So I've had to come up with all these different names. And I'm like, it is a massive process. Like, I mean, there are times
Mhm.
where Wendy and I will be taking a road trip together, and for 2 hours, all we talk about is names, and we still don't come up with one. We'll just be like, "What about this? What about this?" No, nope,
Right.
no, nope.
Right.
Um, that's funny. Well,
And some of it, honestly, you think back, and we know about the heritage of some of these varieties. And I mentioned something. I mentioned about
yeah,
Viticultural, and about the man who did the work, and the people who did the hard work to find that particular grape species. And some of these things, the history, what was involved, and I really kind of lean towards finding a name that honors some of these people, or some of the background associated with these,
yeah,
with the
that's a really
heritage
good
that's
point.
here.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways you could go with it, right? I mean, you could make it
Yes,
regional, you could make
absolutely.
it personal, you could make it historic. Yeah.
Right.
But it's got to be something people can pronounce.
Right. There's that.
Doesn't sound
Also, the
silly.
basics, yeah. Well,
Right.
feel free, yeah, feel free to use me. Feel free to use me. I'd be happy to
Definitely.
at least just be that third party. You get too caught up in your own head and just need
Right.
somebody else who's not, hasn't thought about every other iteration of it, to just hear it sort of as a blank slate. please feel free. That sounds like fun.
Great. We'll take you up on it.
Awesome.
Guys, thank you so much for doing this. This has been a
Thank
lot
you,
of
Adam.
fun, and it's really cool to hear what you're doing. And I really appreciate what you're doing for its value to all of us who are in wine. So thanks for that. Thanks for this conversation.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome. It was
Take
our
care.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And if you did and would like to support this podcast, please do. There is a Patreon link in the show notes where you can subscribe with a monthly, very low subscription to add monetary support. Or please subscribe on your feed, wherever you listen to this podcast. Subscribe and follow this podcast so that you will automatically download it when each new episode comes out. That's one of the few metrics that we can measure to see the support and listenership of this. And otherwise, if you're already listening, subscribe, supporting, whatever, just a long-time listener, haven't done anything, please do a review. If you would, any positive review with 5 stars and a nice word is fantastic and helpful, and really improves the algorithmic performance of this podcast. So thank you so much.